there are many things I would like to ask, but one of them is about the reaction, the way that this is being treated in the Western media, because I've been going through the Western media, and it's
Right.
like everything is being centered on Putin. Putin needs to show he's not isolated. Russia needs to show that it's not alone in the world, and they also point out a lot of the problems that they consider there are problems between the members of the BRICs. They have disagreements in several issues. Would you care to comment this? Why is this being treated this way by the Western media, but especially by the American media? Because it's seldom referred, seldom mentioned. And do you think they don't pay attention to it enough? Do you think they don't think it as a serious thing that is happening? What's your take?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like we all know, right? The Western media, and I'm talking about the mainstream media, not social media or Twitter, which actually tells the truth about most things. But that mainstream legacy media, they just take their orders from their bosses um, upstairs, and they're just told not to cover it. And the reason they're being told this is because, in fact, this alliance of major economies and countries is a huge threat to them. It's a huge threat to their whole system. So they know that it's dead serious, and so that's why they're not covering it. But you can see here, I'm trying to give you guys like a view of what's going on, and there must be like 1,000 journalists in here. And it's really great. This room I'm in is like the size of a football field, and there are media companies here from all over the world of the countries that are represented. So there's a lot of people from the Middle East, from Iran, China, the Far East, South America, Brazil. Who am I leaving out? Lots of Africans,
Yeah.
And quite a few European journalists, French journalists, Germans, Finns, Swiss, UK, France. So no, this is getting covered, and if I think they're going to break through the media blockade. In fact, also another huge country which is very important in the media, in the English language media sphere, is India. And so there are a bunch of TV crews here from India, and a lot of them are broadcasting in English. So yeah, it's going to get out. It's going to get out big time.
What do you think? What danger? And I'm putting this in quotation marks. What danger BRICS can really pose to Western hegemony according to their own perception? I mean, I'm asking you this because you are American and you know better how American think about these issues. Do you think they really feel threatened by it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because the main threat, the biggest one of all, is a challenge to the dollar as world currency. And this is the big thing that analysts keep waiting for. Like, what are the latest developments in coming up with an alternative to the dollar? Because if that happens, and many people think it will happen, American power is over, basically. I mean, if the world stops using or has an alternative even for the dollar, America is essentially bankrupt, right?
Yes.
We've got so much debt that the only way we can manage it is to be able to, continuously loan ourselves more and more. And when that stops, the wheels come off the clown car, and things go back to normal. Here we've got President Bush here addressing a joint meeting of all these heads of state. Very interesting. There's so many heads of state here. I don't have the exact number, but it's last I heard it's like 12. And the streets of Kazan are all closed off, and you see these official motorcades zooming back and forth. And it's yeah, it's very interesting. You really feel like, hey, something historic is happening here.
Where do you see the difference between previous BRICS meetings and this one? What's special about this one that hadn't happened before? Is it really accelerating the process, or is just just another step?
No, obviously this is a decisive one. I mean, and that's indicated by how many heads of state are here, especially from which countries, right? So China, India, um, some of the biggest world players. And, I think they are getting, there is a certain, I can't get inside the heads. And, they're not talking that much to the media. We haven't had hardly any exposure to, representatives of these governments or the heads of state themselves. They haven't given any press conferences or public appearances. And so I can't speak for them, but if I was to imagine what's going on in those meetings, there must be an incredible sense of urgency because of what's happening in the Middle East. The world really seems to be spiraling towards some sort of horrible catastrophe. And so I would imagine that's a huge motivator for these BRICS players to say, look, this is the time, we got to do something, because if we don't, this is obviously not going in a good direction.
There are 34, at least I counted, 34 nations that want to join the BRICS. Why? Yeah. What do they see? What do they expect from the BRICS? What are their hopes?
Well, I think the main idea is that they want to get out from under the boot of, basically extortion and oppression by the existing U.S. European system, which it's not just economical. That's a big part of it, but there's this endless wars that they finance and provoke, and all this aggression and conflict around the world that is a direct result of their policies. The Ukraine war, the Middle East. Taiwan. This is all fake, artificial. Like, these things do not have to happen, and they're happening because the people who run the West, but primarily the United States, that's what they want. They want war and they want conflict, and the rest of the world is looking at this and saying, "We want to get out of here. This is not good."
Oh, I've noticed that there are full members of BRICS, and there are the ones that get this special status of partners of BRICS. What is the difference? Why is this?
That I can't answer well, because I'm not a BRICS expert. So I'd only have to guess that organizations like this have to grow a little bit organically, right? If you flood the place with 30 countries, you're just going to have so much chaos and confusion, and people trying to make deals and so on. So I think I remember, who Pepe Escobar is, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so he's a really good friend of mine. He's obviously one of the journalists who covers the BRICS.
Okay, let me ask you.
Great detail. But anyway, what he told me, I asked him that question, and he said, yeah, it's the big guys who have to sort of agree with each other and lay down some rules. And then once they've got that framework working, then they can let other people in. Otherwise, it would just be too chaotic and to negotiate.
I understand. Are we looking into an alliance that can really give hope for more humanity? It can really be... I ask this because someone asked me to ask this question to see maybe this bloc is forming and it's just going to be another empire, just changing hands. The power just changes hands, maybe, and the average people will not benefit from it. What are the main differences that we can see between this new pole that is emerging?
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely enormous reasons for hope. In fact, I don't see any indication that this could just turn into another exploitive, warmongering kind of empire. And the reason is that the countries that are getting it off the ground are sovereign, right? And they don't have any sort of built-in mentality that their goal is to control the whole world. which unfortunately is what the current U.S.-based empire wants. I mean, and that's the motivation of everything they did, like all that stuff they do in the Middle East and so on, and their attacks against Russia, starting a war with Russia in the Ukraine, a war that Russia did not want and tried very hard to avoid as long as it could. And it's still trying to avoid by trying to keep it limited, like doing what they call a special military operation instead of a full-scale war. So these countries that compose the BRICS, China, Russia, India, they're non-expansionists. They're not trying to build empire, and they don't have this messianic. I mean, basically, the West is controlled not by the U.S. politicians or the U.S. people. It's controlled by this neocon, tiny circle of ideologues who are really more pro-Israel than they are pro-U.S. And they have this messianic Israeli idea that, hey, we want to control everything and everybody, and we'll get there by creating war and chaos all over the world. And so that's what they're doing. That's why the world is in a dire situation it's in.
Do you think the recent sanctions that were justified by the West with the war in Ukraine did play a role in accelerating this process of BRICS?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of countries also realize, hey, we could be next to be sanctioned. And, the funny thing is these sanctions actually stimulated the Russian economy instead of hurting it, because the Russians really got moving on finding alternatives to economic relations with Europe and the West. And so it's just amazing. And we should see this town, Kazan. It's just jam-packed with Chinese car dealers. I've never seen so many Chinese car dealerships. And the streets are full of these really cool, nice, great Chinese cars. And in fact, I was told that the Chinese government or somebody sent hundreds of new Chinese cars into the dealerships so that they'd be on the streets, and it would be like a showcase for the Chinese auto industry. So it's like little touches like that. It's so interesting to see so much going on.
Relatively to the conflict in Russia and Ukraine, were any points discussed? Any solutions put out? Any propositions for the end of the war put out or discussed over there?
I haven't seen that. I do know that they put out a very long statement yesterday regarding the Middle East. 33 pages of detailed criticism and naming names. It was a very strongly worded thing with a lot of factual basis, saying basically this is the U.S.'s fault. Jointly the U.S. and Israel, but the U.S. as much as Israel, because the U.S. is paying for it and basically encouraging it. And apparently they're going to send this statement to the Security Council of the UN. It'll obviously be blocked there, but it'll still, give it a lot more play and a lot more publicity. And it's a very significant moment, because when you have so many big, enormous countries, the biggest countries really, and a lot of smaller ones standing up and saying, you have to stop this. This is outrageous. These are war crimes. This is an unprovoked attack, and you have to roll it back, or else there's going to be trouble. I think they're going to listen to this, even if the Security Council vetoes it because of the U.S.
How do you see the role of Saudi Arabia, and, for example, also Turkey, that wants to join, but it's a NATO member, and Saudi Arabia has a tradition of strong, close relations with the U.S. that just been recently shaken. But how do you see this playing out within the BRICS?
Yeah. So so both of those countries are the ultimate fence sitters, right? They sit on the fence and they try not to take sides, and they try to play both sides to their advantage, and so on and so forth. And there's no reason to think they're going to stop doing that, because they're both extremely vulnerable to being color revolution out of power. I mean, the government, Erdogan, if Washington wants to get rid of them, they basically can. They can unleash the color revolution on him. And other people were telling me here that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS, is he's under incredible pressure from his religious leaders, his Wahhabi imams, who are extremely unhappy with his liberalism, social liberalism, and pandering to the West and so on. And so he's also in great danger on that angle. So I think these guys have to walk a very delicate tightrope, and they're not. We can't expect much greatness from them. They're going to sort of play along, sense that, but that's the way it is.
Okay, care to say any comments, something you would wish to talk about that I haven't asked you?
I would just say, I have to say that having been here for 3 days, it's just so inspiring. There's such a good energy here, and you really get the sense, hey, look, the world is gathering. It's so international. There's so many different people here. Look, there's people in there. You got this Saudi guy in his Saudi outfit, and you see all these Africans walking around in their colorful things. People of all different religions and backgrounds, and everything is it's quite a show. And so there's an energy here that's very positive. And they've also made a huge effort here with culture. They had this opera the day before yesterday with opera singers from all over the world, and it was put together by this famous German opera director. So there's a lot of color and a lot of soft power noticeable in the city. It's all lit up. The Kremlin is he's got this, the Kremlin is like this old Russian fort in the center of town, and it's all the stuff is being broadcast on the walls. So they put a lot of thought in and really tried to make it into a spectacle to convey their messaging, what they're trying to do.
Mr. Charles Bausman, thank you very much for speaking to me. And I look forward for some other opportunity to speak to you about geopolitical affairs. Thank you very much.
Okay.